And tensions are intensifying in the Baltic Sea region as Russia and NATO conduct parallel military exercises.
This strange, odd thing just turned up on the monitor.
Something impossible may be hiding beneath the Baltic Sea. At nearly 300 feet below the surface, an object rests in total silence. And what an AI just detected there is sending shockwaves through the research world. From the moment it was discovered, this anomaly has sparked rumors of hidden technology, lost civilizations, and even something far more disturbing. Why are governments quiet? Why did the funding vanish? And now, why is AI warning us it's not natural? Let's dive into one of the strangest ocean mysteries ever recorded, and what the machine mind may have just uncovered. What AI Cyan uncovers. As interest in the Baltic Sea anomaly continues to grow, new questions have surfaced about what modern technology might reveal, especially when it's not filtered through human perception. In recent years, online speculation has emerged around the idea that AI-assisted tools have been used to reanalyze sonar data of the anomaly. Could an artificial intelligence model trained to recognize underwater formations actually interpret the structure differently than a human? Some believe it already has. According to circulating rumors, an advanced imaging algorithm may have processed high-resolution sonar data and flagged aspects of the anomaly as inconsistent with typical natural formations. What features might have triggered such a reaction? Claims range from angular ridges and radial symmetry to geometric grooves that resemble machined patterns, the kind not usually found in geological formations shaped by water or ice. One particularly persistent detail involves a shallow circular depression at the center of the anomaly, said to resemble a sealed hatch or port. Could that be coincidence? Or is it a feature with real structure and intention behind it? Some claim the algorithm made connections between this and blueprints of known marine vehicles or submerged infrastructure, identifying similarities with panel seams, vent shapes, or pressure hatches. But without public data or confirmed sources, it all remains speculation. Another discussion point involves subtle thermal variations. Reports have surfaced online suggesting that AI thermal mapping might have detected faint heat gradients around the object, slight, but enough to raise questions. At 300 feet below sea level, the seafloor should be thermally stable. So what could explain any energy variation? Could this imply residual power, an internal mechanism once active? Or is it nothing more than sonar interference misread as heat? Skeptics caution against drawing too many conclusions. AI can detect patterns, but it doesn't always understand them. It may see familiar shapes where none exist, especially in incomplete or noisy datasets. Those more cautious about the claims argue that glacial geology is full of surprises, and that what some interpret as construction could easily be the result of ice movement, natural fracturing, or pressure-based rock shaping. But others argue that this is exactly why AI matters in the discussion. It doesn't suffer from pareidolia, the human tendency to see familiar forms in randomness. If a pattern recognition system trained on thousands of shipwrecks, natural reefs, and seafloor anomalies can't classify this object confidently, what does that suggest? Of course, many of these claims haven't been verified. It's unclear who ran the AI scans, what data they used, or what tools were involved. There's no way to confirm if any such analysis has taken place beyond scattered reports and anonymous commentary in niche forums. But that ambiguity only adds to the mystique, because if this analysis happened quietly, what else might have been discovered? Is the anomaly simply a bizarre quirk of nature, a unique glacial formation shaped just right to confuse sonar and divers alike? Or is it something more deliberate, something designed? The speculation continues to grow, especially as more people look back at the original scans and wonder, why does this thing look engineered? And why does it seem to resist every attempt at simple explanation? Whatever the truth may be, one thing remains consistent. The deeper the technology digs, the stranger this object becomes. And this isn't the first time the Baltic Sea anomaly defied explanation, because when it was first discovered, something even stranger happened underwater. The day electronics went dead. When the Ocean X team made their first close approach to the Baltic Sea anomaly in 2011, they weren't chasing legends. Their expedition was focused on locating sunken shipwrecks, specifically lost cases of vintage champagne believed to lie beneath the Baltic waters. What they found instead was something that would make their instruments and their nerves unravel. Roughly 300 feet down, as their ship hovered above the sonar signature, the team prepared to lower cameras and communication tethers. But almost immediately, things began to go wrong. First, the sonar feed flickered with static. Then the satellite phone went silent. Moments later, GPS readings became erratic. Their underwater lights sputtered, then cut out completely. Cameras powered off. Systems rebooted themselves without input. It was as if they had entered a bubble of electromagnetic distortion, a zone where modern technology simply refused to function. The team quickly realized this was more than coincidence. Within a 200-meter radius of the anomaly, electronic equipment stopped responding. Outside that range, everything returned to normal. This wasn't a malfunction. It was proximity-based. The closer they got, the worse it became. Seasoned marine explorers aren't easy to rattle. These were professionals who'd worked in hostile environments, with equipment designed for the pressure and unpredictability of deep-sea work. But even they had no explanation. Multiple attempts to document the anomaly with standard tools failed. Video feeds dropped out. Drones froze mid-operation. One camera recorded for several minutes before blacking out. Its memory card later found corrupted. Skeptics were quick to float theories. Could this be caused by magnetic rocks, natural metallic deposits, volcanic interference? But those theories had problems. The Baltic region isn't volcanically active. The surrounding seabed doesn't match locations where high concentrations of magnetic materials are typically found. And according to the Swedish military, there were no Cold War-era devices, mines, or signal jamming experiments documented in that area. Some compared the disruption to what's been reported in places like the Bermuda Triangle, or certain parts of Siberia's Tunguska region. Locations that have long carried stories of inexplicable compass errors, signal loss, and even missing aircraft. The term electronic dead zone started circulating online. But no one could explain why this zone existed in such an otherwise stable part of the sea. Even stranger were the human reactions. Though not formally documented, members of the Ocean X team privately reported a creeping sense of anxiety while diving near the anomaly. One diver described it as moving through heavy silence. Another, who spoke off-record, claimed it felt like being inside a room that was too aware. The most unsettling quote came from a crew member who later said, "It was like something was watching from inside it, not alive, but awake." Of course, such descriptions are hard to quantify. Stress, low oxygen, pressure changes, these are common enough factors in deep-sea dives. But when paired with electronic failure, directional interference, and repeated equipment breakdowns, the story takes on a more disturbing edge. None of the dive footage from the first mission was ever released in full. The few images that made it to the public showed blurred shapes, darkened ridges, and murky water. But those technical difficulties weren't due to poor planning. They were caused by something no one could explain. The interference didn't just scramble technology. It scrambled the narrative. Because even after that first mission, no one could agree on what they saw or what they felt. All that was clear was this: something down there didn't want to be recorded. And despite the setbacks, the Ocean X team was determined to go deeper, to try again. They weren't done with the anomaly, but strange signals and broken gear were just the beginning. because the anomaly didn't just look strange, it looked engineered. Shapes that shouldn't exist underwater. It doesn't look like it belongs on the ocean floor. When the sonar images of the Baltic Sea anomaly were first released in 2011, even skeptics had to do a double-take. At a glance, it appeared to be a perfectly shaped disk, nearly 200 feet across, with smooth arcs, crisp edges, and a kind of symmetry that screamed design, not erosion. Without any context, most people assumed it was fake, a prop from a sci-fi set or a doctored digital render. But this wasn't science fiction. It was a real sonar return, recorded during a deep-sea expedition led by professional explorers using military-grade equipment. What they found didn't resemble a natural ridge, reef, or rock pile. It resembled a vessel. One of the most unsettling comparisons? The object's resemblance to the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars. This wasn't a passing visual quirk. The structure featured a central dome, radial protrusions, and even a long trench or runway behind it, as if something enormous had crash-landed, skidded across the seabed, and came to rest. This scar on the seafloor was hundreds of feet long and traced back directly to the disk. It didn't just sit there. It arrived. But that was only the beginning. When Ocean X returned for a follow-up dive, their crew managed to descend long enough to collect samples and shoot limited footage before, once again, their equipment began to fail. What they captured, however, defied basic expectations of what natural underwater formations should look like. They found grooves, long, uniform lines cut across the surface, with angles that were suspiciously clean. Some resembled steps, stacked like a massive, eroded staircase. Others were straight ridges, about the size of pipes or panels. In one section of the structure, divers reported what looked like a deliberately carved hatch, a round depression bordered by what might have once been fasteners or ceiling clamps. Skeptics rushed to label it all natural. According to some geologists, glacial movement could theoretically carve out strange patterns. Rock dragged beneath the weight of ice might fracture or shear into odd shapes. But others weren't so sure. These were features more consistent with fabrication than with geological randomness. One aerospace engineer, asked to review the footage independently, made a bold statement. It doesn't look like it eroded over time. It looks like it survived something. And then came the samples. Among them, pieces of blackened basalt, which is typically formed by volcanic activity. But this basalt was different. It showed signs of thermal fusion, melted, and then cooled in a way that suggested exposure to extreme heat. Embedded inside one sample were traces of a metallic substance not native to the surrounding seabed. The Ocean X team described the fragment as unnatural in composition and suspected it was part of a larger metallic frame or component. There's no volcanic history in that part of the Baltic, no underwater vents, no lava tubes, and yet here was a scorched material, fused with metal, lying within a disc-shaped formation at the end of what looked like a crash trail. If this wasn't part of a ship, then what was it? Geologists pushed back. They said unusual formations can happen. They said it's all within the realm of possibility. But as the photos, grooves, and material analysis spread online, a growing number of researchers and independent analysts weren't buying it. Too many elements pointed toward intentional design. And when the footage and raw sonar data began disappearing from public archives, suspicions exploded. Because just when the world was starting to demand answers, everything went quiet. Public interest peaked, then plummeted. Updates from Ocean X slowed. Planned expeditions were postponed indefinitely. Because the truth didn't just sink, it was buried. And not by nature, but by silence. The sudden silence from above. For a brief moment, the world turned its attention toward the depths of the Baltic Sea. The discovery of the anomaly in 2011 sent a ripple through media outlets, scientific communities, and online forums alike. Headlines buzzed with phrases like sunken UFO, ancient megastructure, and the Baltic mystery no one can explain. Ocean X, the exploration team behind the discovery, found themselves at the center of global fascination. Encouraged by the overwhelming interest, the team began organizing return missions. They spoke openly about their findings. Plans for additional expeditions were announced. They even floated the idea of a public crowdfunding campaign to bypass traditional sponsors. Their mission seemed poised to evolve from fringe mystery into a serious, scientific deep dive. Then, almost overnight, everything changed. Funding evaporated. Sponsorships that had previously supported Ocean X's other ventures, including their champagne recovery expeditions, abruptly vanished. One of their primary backers, who had been with them since the early 2000s, ended their partnership with no formal explanation. Conversations that were once open and enthusiastic became awkward and brief. Emails went unanswered, calls unreturned. And just like that, the anomaly stopped making headlines. By late 2012, interviews with the Ocean X team had become infrequent and noticeably restrained. When they did appear in media, their tone had shifted. Gone was the bold confidence. In its place was a more careful, subdued language, as if they were no longer just exploring the ocean, but navigating something else entirely. Something unseen. The last full technical update on the anomaly was quietly published that year. Since then, there have only been vague mentions, hints dropped in passing, references to unresolved data, and soft suggestions that more information might be released in the future. But that future has never arrived. Speculation filled the vacuum. Some claimed the team was threatened. Others believed they were bought off, or worse, discredited on purpose. In online conspiracy forums, whispers began circulating about shadow operatives, military cover-ups, and surveillance vessels spotted in the Baltic Sea weeks after the anomaly hit global news. One theory points directly to NATO. The Baltic region is geopolitically sensitive and closely monitored. If the anomaly were found to be something truly unusual, whether ancient or otherworldly, it would become a matter of national interest. Sweden, Finland, Russia, and NATO all operate in that area. Could one of them have stepped in, quietly suppressing further research? Others think it didn't require threats or interventions, just public manipulation. Flood the internet with debunking articles, dismiss the discovery as glacial rock, and drown the story in memes, jokes, and sarcastic clickbait. By the time serious researchers came around, the public would already have moved on, mystery neutralized by mockery. Yet, through it all, one thing stands out. Ocean X never retracted anything. Not once did they say, "We got it wrong." They never changed their story, never backtracked on the claim that something profoundly strange lay beneath the Baltic Sea. And that's what makes the silence so loud. If the object had been confirmed as a rock, wouldn't that have been publicly announced? Wouldn't the skeptics have celebrated and the team admitted the truth? But that never happened. Instead, it's been over a decade of vague comments, disappearing data, and stalled expeditions. The truth wasn't disproven. It was simply quieted. And in that silence, theories began to multiply. Not wild guesses, but structured, detailed alternatives, ones that tried to explain the anomaly's design, its unnatural energy field, and the bizarre response that followed. And if you think it ends there, wait until you see the theories that emerged from the shadows, because some of them are too detailed and too strange to ignore. Theories too wild to dismiss. When the scientific community went quiet and Ocean X retreated from public view, the vacuum left behind was quickly filled by theories. Some were familiar, grounded in old mysteries. Others were stranger, unsettling in their implications. But all of them had one thing in common. None could be fully disproven. With no official explanation, The anomaly invited interpretation, and the Internet responded. The most widespread theory insists that what lies beneath the Baltic Sea is a crashed spacecraft. The disk shape, the central dome, the long trench that appears to trail behind it, as if caused by a sudden impact and slide. Add in the electronic interference, the gear-like ridges, and the melted basalt samples, and many point to this being more than just a rock. They believe it's a malfunctioning alien vessel, resting where it fell thousands of years ago. Supporters of the crash theory often cite declassified Cold War documents describing disc-shaped reconnaissance crafts and unidentified objects tracked near the Arctic. Some even claim retired military analysts, speaking off-record, admitted that the sonar outline of the anomaly bears a striking resemblance to known UFO shapes recorded during NATO operations in the 1980s. Whether those accounts are credible or not is debated, but their persistence has helped fuel the belief that something not of this Earth may have ended up on the seafloor. Others reject the extraterrestrial idea in favor of something more terrestrial and more ancient. This camp argues that the anomaly could be a man-made structure, created by a civilization that existed before the end of the last ice age, when the Baltic region was still dry land. If true, it would mean the object is over 12,000 years old. Some believe it could have been a temple, a machine, or a kind of forgotten power station left behind by a society lost to rising seas and time. They point to the straight grooves, geometric patterns, and precisely carved features found on the anomaly as signs of construction, not coincidence. These theories are often linked to broader ideas of advanced ancient cultures, sometimes drawing connections to myths of Atlantis or pre-flood civilizations mentioned in ancient texts. The idea is not that aliens built the anomaly, but that early humans did, with help, knowledge, or tools we no longer understand. Then there's the theory that ties it to one of the darkest chapters in modern history. During World War II, the Baltic Sea was a heavily militarized zone used by Nazi Germany for experimental projects, including rumored tests of advanced propulsion and underwater technology. Some believe the anomaly may be a relic of one such project, an abandoned base, a test platform, or even a failed weapon lost to history. While no official records mention anything that matches the anomaly, its location, shape, and electromagnetic anomalies fit closely with known goals of Nazi engineering at the time. But that theory runs into its own problems. The depth of the object and the age of the surrounding rock seem to predate World War II. If it is connected to Nazi experimentation, then it must have been built on top of something else, something much older, raising more questions than it answers. Still others believe the object is a kind of prehistoric monument, possibly erected during the Stone Age when the area wasn't submerged. They see it as an underwater Stonehenge, part of an ancient global pattern of megalithic structures. But again, that doesn't explain the fused metal found in the basalt samples, or the apparent scorched surfaces. Who, in the Stone Age, had access to extreme heat, metalwork, or advanced geometry? In the end, no single theory fits all the facts. And that's what keeps the anomaly alive in the public's imagination. Every possibility opens a door into something larger, be it alien, ancient, secret, or sacred. And as theories grow, the object at the bottom of the Baltic begins to sound less like an isolated mystery and more like a fragment of something bigger. But the deeper you go, the more the legend echoes something older than history itself, something mythic. Myths, gateways, and ancient warnings. Not all mysteries begin in data. Some begin in myth, in stories passed down across generations, whispered from one era into the next. And when those myths begin to echo real discoveries, it forces us to ask a more unsettling question. What if they were never stories at all? Across ancient cultures, tales of sky gods, otherworldly visitors, and portals to unknown realms appear with striking consistency. They come from isolated tribes and advanced empires alike, separated by oceans and centuries, yet sharing a similar voice, one that speaks of things descending from the sky, disappearing into the sea, and leaving behind powerful artifacts that hum with forgotten energy. In the Baltic region, Norse legends speak of star vessels, fiery crafts that crashed into the northern waters, disappearing in storms and leaving behind unnatural whirlpools. Some sagas describe luminous disks falling like burning suns and sinking near the islands that now dot the modern Baltic Sea. These weren't just omens or symbols, they were described in practical terms as events, as sightings. Finnish oral history mentions giants, beings who once built vast circular fortresses along the coastlines, now submerged beneath the waves. These structures were said to be tools of the sky lords, used to call storms and silence the birds. It's poetic language, yes, but also specific. Rings, machines, silence. Even more intriguing are ancient Sumerian records, among the earliest written texts in human history, that tell of Anunnaki, the sky gods who arrived in flying disks and retreated into the oceans when their time on land had passed. These accounts describe them not as spirits, but as rulers, beings with purpose, tools, and presence. The Sumerians built ziggurats, stepped pyramids, to mimic the heavens and honor their visitors. Some scholars argue they were also tracking return paths, gateways. Could the Baltic Sea Anomaly be one of these gateways? A remnant from a time when something, or someone, walked among early humans and later left, leaving behind a dormant artifact. The object's circular shape, engineered grooves, and apparent energy disruptions match too closely with descriptions from these stories to dismiss them entirely. Especially now that artificial intelligence has confirmed the structure doesn't fit known natural patterns. And this may not be an isolated case. Some researchers suggest that the anomaly could be part of a global pattern, a network of submerged objects located at key intervals around the planet. Off the coast of Japan, beneath the Yonaguni waters, lies a stepped monolith some believe to be an ancient city. Near Cuba, sonar has detected symmetrical stone structures deeper than any known human construction. And in the Arctic Ocean, beneath polar ice, seismic readings have picked up inexplicable metallic echoes, possibly linked to something artificial. Are these coincidences, or scattered pieces of a global system, hidden beneath rising seas and shifting continents? The idea of an ancient planetary grid has long been dismissed as pseudoscience. But with modern scanning tech, especially AI-powered sonar analysis, those patterns are beginning to reemerge. And the implications are staggering. Because if these structures are connected, then the anomaly in the Baltic Sea is not just a mystery. It's a key, not to our past, but to something that predates even that. Something older than written language, possibly older than humanity itself. Which brings us to a terrifying possibility. What if we're not just uncovering history, but reactivating it? What if, by scanning, diving, and disturbing these objects, we're waking them up? The AI analysis didn't just label the Baltic Sea structure as unnatural. It also detected residual energy, slight but real, like a device on standby. And that leads to a question no one is ready to answer. Because what AI just scanned may not just be old, it may still be alive. What happens if it wakes up? It began with a pattern, a faint signature buried in sonar data. Barely noticeable, a slight distortion in the surrounding thermal field, dismissed at first as interference. But when recent AI models reanalyzed that same data, using updated stress mapping and electromagnetic loop simulations, a new prediction emerged, one that no human had made. The AI wasn't just identifying anomalies, it was tracking change. And what it found suggests something chilling. The object may be entering what researchers have tentatively called a waking state. Not in the cinematic sense, no glowing lights or rising towers, but in the way a dormant system might stir after long rest, an artifact shifting its energy signature, a mechanism registering disturbance, a machine built for some purpose we no longer understand, beginning to respond. Thermal readings taken over a 12-year span show a slight but consistent fluctuation in heat distribution around the anomaly, too subtle for early equipment to detect, but visible now with modern spectral analysis. AI-generated models suggest this could indicate one of two possibilities. The object is slowly releasing stored energy, or it's absorbing environmental input. In other words, it's not cooling down. It may be powering up. This new data has reignited interest from researchers and reignited concern from those who previously walked away. Ocean X has quietly floated the idea of returning, this time with enhanced technology. Deep-sea drones equipped with resonance scanners, LiDAR imaging tethers, and radiation-sensitive monitoring equipment. But every attempt to launch such an expedition has hit a wall, logistical delays, funding mysteriously pulled, and what insiders refer to as international complications. Because now, the discovery is no longer just academic. It's political. The Baltic Sea sits between Sweden, Finland, Russia, and NATO-aligned territories. Any renewed expedition into sensitive waters brings with it surveillance, scrutiny, and diplomacy. And when that expedition involves probing a structure that might not be natural, the stakes shift even further. In the meantime, civilian research groups and independent labs have taken matters into their own hands. Open-source AI teams are running real-time simulations using the original Ocean X sonar data. Some of these simulations produce results that echo the official ones. They show stress pattern loops intensifying, EM anomalies widening. One model, built by an independent team in Norway, predicted that if the anomaly is disturbed again, it may emit a stronger electromagnetic field, one capable of affecting not just cameras, but potentially communication networks and seismic sensors within a 5-kilometer radius. Most experts caution against jumping to conclusions. These are just models, nothing conclusive. But the implications are hard to ignore. Because if the anomaly is mechanical, and if it is reacting, then that suggests something far more unsettling than anything we've theorized before. It means we are not observing it passively. We are interacting with it, triggering it, perhaps even communicating with it. And that raises a final terrifying question. What if it's not just ancient? What if it's not just alien? What if it's patient? For years, we've assumed the anomaly was a mystery to solve, a puzzle buried by time. But what if that assumption is backward? What if it's not an artifact from the past, but a mechanism built for the future? What if it was never meant to be found, until now? Because as AI continues to probe deeper, as machines begin to recognize what human eyes missed, the signals are becoming harder to ignore. The object may be waiting. And if that's true, we may not be studying the Baltic Sea Anomaly anymore. We may be waking it up. The Baltic Sea Anomaly has defied logic, silenced experts, and now confounded even artificial intelligence. Whether it's ancient, alien, or something stranger still, it refuses to be ignored. If you want to keep diving into the world's hidden truths and forgotten mysteries, hit like, comment your theory below, and subscribe for more stories like this. And don't miss the video on screen. It explores another deep-sea mystery that might just be connected. The ocean holds secrets we were never meant to find. Are we ready for what comes next?